Good morning, Shane. Um, well, good. Well, welcome back from Lisbon, Gregory. It's nice to have you home stateside. I'm sure you'd love to be over in Egypt as well,
I'm
but
so happy to not be a cop. Um,
yeah, I'm watching the reports. It's like, I think I was sharing with Ravati. It's like, love, love it, hate it, all wrapped into one all the time for the folks that are there. But it feels like it's a good spot for our friends at Regen Foundation right now, which is exciting to see them connecting into a pretty deep web. And obviously, we've got a bunch of colleagues over there as well. So I'm eager to hear the reports and hopefully some optimism, at least a tad, given the state of things. But
cool.
we'll
Well,
see.
I'm just oh good. We've got Gainforest here. They've requested. Please bring them up.
Done.
I was
Done.
just jamming with them in Lisbon at the refi stuff. They're at COP, so we'll get a little bit of live information about what's happening there in Egypt with the Congress of the Parties. And yeah, wanted to give some updates on marketplace action. I think we've got some folks jamming on scientific methodologies in the house, so we could dig into some of that. So, as always, a lot on the agenda, and yeah, it should be a really exciting and fun conversation as always. So, I'm not sure. I think there we go. Hey, Game Forest team, is that Mr. David Dow there?
It looks like they just
Oh,
dropped out. I'm guessing they might be
they've got
not on a mobile phone
bad.
or
Well,
something.
that could be. I think it's probably more just crappy internet. Um,
Yeah.
so we'll see. We'll see if they pop up. Cool. So wow, the marketplace, not well, the larger crypto market activity has been quite turbulent the last few days. It's been pretty wild. Um,
But doesn't it just feel like we've seen this movie before? Like, I'm just
about
like,
a
I'm
hundred times.
not
Yeah.
right. I'm just like struggling, and to all my crypto brethren and sistren, I'm just like, hey, we we we've seen the movie over and over. We can do better, and then there's projects and philosophies and designs around crypto that are specifically exist to avoid exactly what we've seen that has caused just such systemic pain, regularly, and frankly puts us in the crosshairs of regulators and all kinds of folks. It's just enormously frustrating from my perspective. But I guess these are the growing pains, and maybe silver linings abound. I hope. But in the meantime, much much empathy for all the folks who on the retail side who've been again just really harmed by poor choices.
Yeah, totally. It's pretty sad. So, c'est la vie. Um, just sending out a couple invites for folks if you want to hop up here. Oh, I see Bruno. Awesome from Echo Nave. It'd be fun to jam with you, Bruno, too, if you want. I know there's several people. I sort of see an emergent crew to jam about agroforestry. So Ned and Jimo, I just invited you up as well. I think it'd be fun to just kind of dig in a little bit to the state of agroforestry monitoring, reporting, verification. So if you're on mobile and you're able, feel free to come join us. So yeah, I wanted to give a little. I was hoping to have David Dow up here from the fantastically named David Dow from Gainforest, from our friends at Gainforest, to be up here. But I'll start with just a quick report back from my recent time in Lisbon, and a little bit about sort of the live stream from COP, because although I am not there, I'm in pretty constant communication with Ravati, who is there, the executive director of Regen Foundation, and our friends at Cerulean Ventures, Matt and Jahed, and the folks at the Blockchain X Climate Leadership Network, Dave Ford and Chris. So just kind of, and my friend Ethan from How Good. So there's lots of sort of like engagement and texting going on. So I have sort of a little bit of a sense of things that I wanted to share back with people. So item number one, just a quick feedback from Lisbon, and then we can sort of maybe do a little bit of COP stuff, and then let's jam on monitoring and new classes of credits. And Timo, I see you out there. Awesome. Good morning. Cool. So Lisbon. Well, first off, I mean, it's a little bit ironic and unfortunate that uh, this whole FTX drama is unfolding directly after being at Solana Breakpoint. For those of you who know, Solana and FTX have been pretty deeply related for a long time. So it's certainly, I think, taking a pretty big dent out of maybe just Solana ecosystem confidence. But honestly, I have every confidence that Solana, I mean, it was very interesting. It was my first time going to a big Solana conference. I was invited there both to give to be on a panel to talk about regenerative finance, and we did sort of a Solana Foundation sponsored side event, refi side event in partnership with the refi DAO. And I have to say, the enthusiasm and excitement from the Solana community to start getting into regenerative finance was really palpable. There was a lot of positive excitement and engagement, and every community is a little bit different, but the cool thing about Solana is just the pragmatism. They definitely kind of go all in on a number of different levels when they choose to dig into something, and you can kind of see that in their pretty vibrant NFT ecosystem. So Regen Network is all about the multi-chain, cross-chain. We've always been trying to build a neutral system to work across all of these different kind of tribal crypto ecosystems and into the Web2 space as well, with the foundation of quality and community ownership and sort of transparency and integrity. So I'm pretty excited about that forming relationship. I'm really excited to see the Solana community start to lean in and engage with regenerative finance. I think it's pretty healthy for the larger space to have more different crypto ecosystems kind of trying to lean in. So just my high level takeaway was, a lot of excitement. And I think I was kind of pitching, I'm kind of trying to build a meme movement around all of the major layer one crypto players, sort of what we might call the broader Web3 ecosystem, having the foundations and the protocols kind of go all in on a responsible and collaborative experiment for a nature-based reserve currency. Something sort of like was described by Kim Stanley Robinson and via Delton Chin, not an ohm fork, but instead sort of a more conservative one-to-one, eco credit, carbon credit backed reserve currency system that everybody opts into, that we sort of do as a common public good. And why I've been pitching that and sort of alluding to it and starting to converse about it, tweeting about it, talking about it in public spaces a little bit, is because I think Web3 has the opportunity to sort of go out and do some experimentation. And I think this concept of a nature-based currency is starting to be very actively explored by central banks, by private banks. You see NASDAQ doing stuff. You see all these people doing things. And I actually think my experience at the Greenhouse event in Medellin and beyond is that, there's enough of a shared culture across the Web3 ecosystem that's focused on open source, open data, public digital goods, that I actually think we can more quickly address some of the stickier challenges around coordination and cooperation than the incumbent institutions. And it isn't actually like we need to cooperate with them and they need to adopt it too. This isn't going to be an either or, but I think, if we kind of build enough momentum and enough steam as a broader sort of multi-chain, interchain ecosystem to be working on this, we'll get a lot of work done over the next year, and it will be very inspiring, informing, and push positive, responsible ways of going about this out into the rest of the monetary and financial system in a time, like macro financial conditions and monetary conditions are really turbulent right now. So it's actually an important time to be showing kind of responsible alternatives. So that's I was pushing that a little bit and just inviting people to consider that, and inviting Solana Foundation to consider that, and others, and just sharing it a little bit here as a report back. So, ping me if you want to jam on all of that. I think it needs to be open, participatory, cross-chain, responsible. This isn't about sort of like one project trying to rule it. We really need to sit down and kind of work out the details together and build adoption. So with that said, that's kind of my Lisbon report back. Dimo, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself, and maybe we can dig into jamming a little bit about what you're working on at Sylvie Protocol, and where that's all going, and maybe we can invite some other folks up to get into conversation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And wow, do you want to talk about sort of nature-based reserve currency or about agroforestry? I feel like either way, no,
let's jam.
Kind of what
let's jam. Wherever you want to go, man.
Yeah, no, we're very inspired by sort of the original Ohm Forks protocol on liquidity, augmented bonding curves, all of that stuff. I think that is like a long-term vision, but would definitely love to talk about that. And there's so much work happening with forwards. It's not that forwards is the meme or should be the meme. I think they're sort of the back-end vehicle, but that would allow sort of a meme to take off. And my bias here, my preference, I suppose, is let's not just look at carbon. I mean, let's look at everything. And so we at Sylvie think the tree is a very symbolic asset class, but also one with so much utility and even scarcity and sort of the perfect ingredients to kind of build this reserve asset class of sorts that kind of captures a lot of upside. But I know you brought me up here originally to talk about agroforestry. And we're super eager and about the courageous lands methodology and the biodiversity methodology, because we want to build on those two, and Sev, as well as a few others. We're all collaborating, including Diogo with Agroforest DAO, some of the agroforestry tools we're building at Sylvie, to put together a practice-based a methodology that brings all of this into the agroforestry world.
Awesome. So let's dig. Ned, if you'd like to come up, or you have the opportunity to come up, I'd love for you to chat a little bit about this as well. I think it's a useful, because Dimo, we sort of back and forth on DM a lot about this, and I guess taking a step back, there's a lot going on in the world of methodologies to monitor, report, verify, and quantify ecological benefits of agroforestry, right? And you mentioned a couple of the different efforts, but I think it'd be nice for listeners if we take a step back and we kind of talk about some of the different categories and approaches. You mentioned stewardship or practice-based credits. There are several different model-based approaches like Shamba that are being worked on and upgraded that I know we're very active in at R&D and sort of the broader ecosystem. There's measurement-based approaches like Courageous Lands has been doing, kind of a derivative of the Carbon Plus grasslands, the next generation of that applied to agroforestry. There's the measurement approach that Sylvie is taking that is sort of tree by tree. So sort of taking a step back, maybe starting with you, Dimo, and then Ned, you can chime in as well. I'd just love to, as someone who's developing a project and still in this sort of early stages, how are you finding the maybe sometimes confusing process of discerning between these different approaches and trying to decide on how, your next steps in terms of bringing something into the marketplace?
Yeah, and a big shout out to Ned. There's definitely been a lot of back and forth, but a meeting I had with Ned was really instrumental in getting the ball rolling, and he was very articulate and helpful. And yeah, thank you, Ned. What we're doing at Sylvie is very much methodology agnostic in terms of some of the more claim-based and MRV sort of devised methodologies out there. We're focusing a little bit more on community behind impact, as well as some gamification and simplification of associated coordination tools. So we think we need a really strong MRV foundation. So we want to implement best practices, whether that's human sensing or drone or even satellite. There's a lot of GIS involved. But ultimately, I think our main goal here is to make this as easy to use and accessible to others. And we then want to be able to either stack or perhaps offer different methodologies depending on the interoperability landscape for a given bioregion or for a given project development. I hope that made sense.
Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by interoperability landscape for a given project or bioregion.
Yeah, so let's say there's a couple of projects composing, whether that's future forward financing and maybe some Web3 native VVB verification body. And maybe, Basin DAO, for example, bringing in the real estate layer. For that particular project, there would be a specific stack. And so that might mean a different methodology altogether for, say, carbon. And so we're methodology agnostic in that regard. We want to be able to create ground truth that is that can be used by different protocols or different methodologies. And so at the end of the day, we're focused on the sort of human-centric activities and the interface, the very interface by means of an app that we're building currently.
Awesome. So what I'm hearing you say is what you've started really honing in on at Sylvie, and I know this, you were sort of already doing this before, but as the dance has unfolded with all of these different actors and different layers of people starting to collaborate, what you're really sort of wanting to hone in on is the first layer of data collection. Is that correct? Like getting what the application interface and maybe the economic incentives and potentially, you were mentioning gamification of kind of citizen science, where people can go out and collect primary data that then can be used upstream by a variety of different methodologies that people are using to generate an eco credit or feed a forward contract or reduce uncertainty around existing credit types. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, ground truth at the end of the day is ground truth, right? So, of course, projects need to be audited and there are all types of techniques. But we're trying to do to reforestation what sort of Robinhood did for the financial space. I mean, there's a ton of regulatory barriers and nuance that ultimately, made like brokerage type of services very technical and difficult. And I still see the carbon space and even the emerging eco credit space somewhat technical and difficult. But what if we can, at the very least, simplify this entire process and gamify it and trying to grow it from a community and gamification perspective. And then you can then start rolling out fully integrated stacks. And with that, I mean one where the rights to future credits are in place, maybe an agreement with the landowner is in place. And so you have an accredited place with a project developer. And in that case, then you can actually start rolling out payouts and financial instruments on top of that gamification.
Ned, do you want to hop in here? Do you have anything that's emerging on your mind, just as far as, how does what Jimo's talking about kind of intersect with the process you've been working on with the broader community around stewardship, environmental stewardship, crediting, and the shift, sort of augmenting an outcome focused approach with sort of a more ongoing streaming approach where we're centering stewardship, including data collection and other things? Where are you seeing complementarity or differences? Yeah, what's on your mind?
Yeah, well, first, Jimo, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. I mean, with this agroforestry initiative, that I'm more or less taking a hands-off approach. I'm helping out whenever I can, but I'm more of an observer, and part of that is because I think this is really the first instance of a kind of thematic community that's being built within the Regen Network. And this is something that, within the registry team and the science team, we've been talking about for a while. And it's just neat to see what Seb, Jimo, and the other folks have been doing to kind of self-organize, bring people together, and collaborate to create a methodology. Because up to this point, most of the methodologies have been, kind of siloed, individual groups putting them together, whereas this is an effort it's really a community effort, and it's for me, it's just fascinating to see. And I think it's just neat that they just basically, they're trying to get stuff done. They're not overthinking the community part, which is good. And they're working with some pretty simple tools to do it. And it seems, from what I can tell, it seems to be working.
So I have a couple of questions for you, Jimo. So question number one. These are selfish questions. these are questions for me to understand, like what's working, what's not working, for us to understand really as a community. So question number one is, how are you finding where are you communicating with the other members of this ad hoc community of practice that's coming together? Are you communicating in a Telegram group, in a Discord group? Are you using Hilo? Are you using Commonwealth Forum? Are you in a Signal DM chat? Are you communicating in public on Twitter? Like, where are you? Google Docs, where are you doing work together? And what's working well about that and what's not working well about that?
Yeah, I'm meeting Becca soon to be onboarded to Hilo, but this has lived mostly in recurring meetings. And a huge shout out to Sev and Ecolabs for helping organize some of the spine and for being on the ground in Barichara right now. But yes, we are engaging with smallholder farmers all over. I'm personally from Mozambique, so I'm connected to smallholder farmers in Malawi, in Zambia, and in Kenya. And so we have a bunch of case studies that we're serving. But I'm excited for Hilo, and we have submitted a concept note and we've heard back. Our next big thing, not to deviate the conversation, but is we really need to start moving this data on chain. And so the data module and hypercerts and what's happening with Filecoin and understanding how much can be accomplished on the claim resolution side of things, perhaps more sort of geoquerying type of capabilities, some of what Astral Protocol is building. So that's where we're at the technical side, because we need to make decisions and commit to them. But as far as organization, yeah, it's mostly a lot of FaceTime and meeting time.
Cool. Yeah, great. And totally agreed on this really exciting intersection. We call this larger story the data weaving story internally at R&D Inc., where there's storage, availability, sort of schema and registry systems or metadata format systems, so that we have geospatial querying, sort of the appropriate approach, an efficient approach to on and off chain data. The next evolution beyond the data module. Just note, of course, the test, data module is live. our thinking about all of this has been to try to, there's always a risk of over engineering things and going kind of way into a cul-de-sac in which things are over specified. And we get sucked into all of these like big meta conversations around decentralized identity and verifiable credentials, instead of kind of letting that emerge organically according to the need of developers and projects and things like that. So, we've done our best to try to sort of like, sort of skirt that and create a pretty open, that, the data module is pretty open. There's still a little bit of work we have to do to ensure that the regen data model and the model of CO2 storage is compatible. But I think both Filecoin and R&D, we're on that. We've got a shared Slack channel. There's work being done there. So I'm pretty excited that that's going to be quickly resolved. I'm curious, Jimo, have you connected at all with the folks at Cambium Validator, Paul and Will from RSI and PharmOS respectively? Because they've done an awful lot of work on the data module itself and on primary data collection. And my sense is that weaving them in and having a conversation with them about sort of on the ground data field collection and storage and interaction for signing and anchoring data in service to generating whatever class of eco credits you might be looking for would be really valuable.
Interesting. No, I have not connected. I imagine they're working on like open web and classification standards.
They did a bunch of early work on the data module itself and on API work. Ryan's here, so he could speak more as well. Ryan, feel free to hop up if you'd like. I'll send you a invitation if you want to come up and jam a little bit about the data module, etc. So, Jimo, we'll connect you. We'll connect you with them. They're also always, and actually, just in terms of, this really, I find quite exciting sort of how to build in public. We are building in public. Everybody gets to just witness that who's on Regenerati News Hour. So hopefully it's fun for everybody. So every other week we have the community dev call, in which we do a bit of just roadmap updating, and then there's sort of dialogue back and forth. Paul and Will are pretty much always on that call. And so, there is sort of like a reoccurring rhythm. And if you wanted to schedule sort of essentially a working session on the data module itself, and even give a little bit of a presentation, Jimo, about where you guys are at, what you guys are needing, what you guys have played with, what you've had trouble with, whether it's, docs or, just challenges. That's a really fantastic place to come and just ping us. You can ping Sari, who's the community manager, and just say, hey, I want to, give me 5 minutes or whatever. And Will and Paul are there. Every day, every other week. So that's a really cool touch point. And pretty much all the right technical people are there, right? So Ryan, who's the Regen Ledger product manager, is there. There's usually a representative of science team. And we just really try to keep that rhythm of every 2 weeks, we're going to have an open call. We go over where we're at in the roadmap. Community members can come and contribute. There's an interesting balance between sort of the science and application side of people who are digging in and building things, and sort of the deeper, more esoteric ledger side of things. But we like to keep both of those conversations really in the open for sort of these two sides of the community to be educating each other about that, just what's needed. So hopefully that's helpful context. Ned, do you have anything else to add? I'm actually curious, Ned, to hear you comment about your perceptions around the relationship between, I guess, sort of what's emerging vis-a-vis methodology development and technology development, right? And how we're trying to, from your perspective, sitting in the science and registry team, how are you perceiving this community effort to sort of bootstrap the attestation graph, to bootstrap the interaction with, open data as a foundation for how claims are being made?
Yeah, well, I think, there's a lot of interest in it for sure. And there's a lot of work going on to support those sorts of like attestation graphs in the DeSci space, especially. There's a lot of really neat stuff going on. It's still, I think it's all still pretty experimental from my perspective, although there's some projects that are coming together much better than some others. And I'm trying to keep a handle on what's going on. It's difficult because there is so much going on. I am participating in one that's called DeSci Nodes, which is not directly relevant. That's focused mostly on the peer-reviewed literature, but it is also bringing in data and algorithms and all that stuff. So it's that basic framework is pretty much what we're looking for if we're trying to put together some sort of attestation network. So I'd say right now there's just a lot of experimentation going on, and if people are interested in checking out some of the stuff that's going in the DeSci space, feel free to send me a message, and I can send you out some links or something and try to get you connected to some of these projects.
Did you, Ned? Did you by chance listen to that 7.5-hour long podcast that I was inviting everybody to listen to with Lex Friedman and Balaji, in which they spent like 2 hours talking about attestation networks?
I did. I mean, it was, yeah. I mean, it was, my perception was it wasn't. I mean, I think it's attestation networks or graphs and stuff are fit in that. But I did listen to the whole thing. I read Network State.
I think you did read Network State. I think there was probably only about 2 hours of that conversation that were, directly pertinent. But it's cool that you listened to the whole thing. I'm sorry I didn't give you timestamps.
No. The timestamps for that. It's just I like both of those guys, Lex Friedman and Balaji. So that it was really neat. I like to hear those different perspectives being floated around, and it's kind of a nutty idea, but I think this whole idea of kind of ecosystem regeneration could become something like a network state. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. But just right now, it's more of a kind of a thought experiment. But it's something that's be worth batting around, thinking about.
Well, right. So I'll just sum up that thought experiment for the audience a little bit. Essentially, and this has been, I don't know. I mean, I kind of think our assumptions about this predate Balaji talking about any of this, but it could have been influenced by him, as he's quite a prolific tweeter and memer. But so rewind. Since day one in Regen Network's white paper and our inception, we sort of have had this idea that there needs to be community generated, what I generally refer to in my own writings as intersubjective verification, in which you make it easy for different counterparties to be anchoring their own observations about ecological state. And you use that, and there's some strong analogs in about 20 years of work on participatory guarantee systems and community-run verification systems as alternatives to like organic certification and things like that. Those have had trouble scaling, but we have long thought that there's a lot of research and development work to do here, but Web3 tools and what we're building at Regen Network, we believe kind of has the ability to start to make coordinating that sort of like multi-actor sense-making or verification process much cheaper, much easier, and be a more rigorous and trustworthy foundation for these markets for ecosystem services. Because the alternative to that is that you have a very centralized institutional approach in which there is sort of like an ivory tower, and that ivory tower tells you what is good and what is bad. And there's a variety of reasons we can see in our society today how that tends to get corrupted or break down, or it's just not able to sort of keep up with how dynamic and how changing things are. And when we think about climate change and ecological crisis, the theory is that we really need this kind of what I will refer to as an attestation graph system, attestation network, where you have a ledger of record, in this case, Regen Ledger, and you're building out a graph of knowledge that people can leverage to make claims, right? So hopefully that's helpful for everybody, just to sort of contextualize. But I know I'm gonna yeah, feel free to say hi. Welcome up.
Hello, everybody. Nice talking to you. I'm here talking from Brazil, and I'm on the road, but paying closing attention to what you're saying, and it's a very interesting talk about methodologies. This is something that we think a lot. This week I was with some associations from my city here, which is Belo Horizonte, some organic associations. There was some meetings on Sunday, and there was also professors from university, and there was a huge discussion about this organic certification thing. So, like Greg was saying, there are all these methods, more institutionalized ones, and more like people-made things, like a participatory guarantee system, right? So that's basically like most of associations are doing here. So I was proposing with them this weekend that because econavi.com, it's a page where any project can make its own portfolio, and this portfolio is recorded on your page. So we kind of thought that, the simplest way to start some verification system is just like by letting people picture what they're doing and make a small sentence on that, just more like spontaneously, like they already do in other social media. So they can also do it with Econavi. And yeah, there is a lot of interest of people, like in using some sort of methodology that is non-official, but it brings legitimization, because I think legitimacy is all about legitimacy, right? And before the cell phones and all of these things, like legitimacy usually was a very top bottom thing. But nowadays, with phones and pictures and like people seeing what others are doing, this also builds some sort of legitimacy in the community. So I really think that these kinds of methodologies, more simple ones, they have a strong power on making, like social beliefs and social legitimacy achieving. So yeah, we've been focusing on that. So mainly we are trying to bring this methodology with some professors here that like organic association could certify themselves, with pictures and texts, as a first step into complexifying more things for farmers. So yeah, I just wanted to bring this to the conversation. I think it's in connection with what is being saying. And yeah, this moment I'm heading to my agroforestry system, and great talking with you guys.
Love it. Thanks, Breno, for chiming in and saying hi. I got to hang out with Breno in Medellin and have a really epic Econavi hat that I'm pretty excited about. So thanks, Breno. Cool. Well, I'm gonna just pause. Ryan, you hopped up here. Do you want to chime in and share anything about, like, just from your perspective about, maybe the larger, what we're aiming for in terms of use of the data module, and kind of the larger theory of trust graph or attestation graph, and the reality of that, and this tension or opportunity of engaging with dynamic people on the ground. You were there in Barichara with Sev at the beginning, and probably got kind of to think about that on the ground reality, and now you're back sort of leading product on Regen Ledger. Yeah, we'd just love to hear what's on your mind, and what your thoughts are regarding this topic.
Sure. Yeah, I missed the first part of this conversation, so I'm not fully up to date in terms of what has been discussed. But in regards to just like data module, the initial implementation was a very baseline implementation, allowing for the anchoring and attesting to data, and setting up a resolver so that you could direct people to where that data is being stored, either off chain or on another chain. And we're agnostic about like where the data is being stored. But essentially, we're providing that kind of initial base layer for attestations to take place and anchoring to take place. There's been a lot of discussion in the community recently, just like questions that are popping up on Twitter and in Discord around the data module and use cases for the data module. And I think more than anything, one thing that is on the top of my mind is bringing together another call. We used to have like a data standards working group, and that could evolve or become more community owned. But I think there's a really good opportunity for us to kind of like resync on what other projects are using and what their needs are, and how it relates back to the use cases that kind of we've explored at Regen Network. And then the data story in general, MRV story is also one of our higher priorities for next iterations now that the marketplace has launched and that code is live. So we're really interested in just digging in and understanding what other people's needs are, and how they're interested in engaging with the data module use cases on Regen Ledger. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure where to go. Bari Char was an awesome event in understanding like the needs of projects such as Eco Labs, and their use cases around the data module is something that we're exploring, and I think kind of creating this. There's a lot of these other projects within the space that are providing infrastructure as well as like building out tooling, like Cambium that was mentioned, and just trying to kind of reposition ourselves or like figure out exactly where we stand in terms of the ecosystem's tools, and make sure that we're not doing any duplication, but also that we're providing that underlying infrastructure for anchoring and attestations on Regen Ledger. So I think there's conversations to be had. I don't know if anyone has any like specific questions, or if there's anything else that I can speak to related to the data module, but just kind of some general thoughts there.
Cool, thank you. Demo, Ned, any questions or dialogue that you'd like to dig into with Ryan? Any questions you have around the current state of the data module, where it might be going, concerns or complaints that you have. This is a good time.
Yeah, no complaints. Recently, I've been in touch with Ryan. Appreciate his openness, and this is also sort of not just a discussion of the agroforestry work we're doing, but also Demeter, which is a sort of distributed MRV stack, working on a couple of pilot projects. And Tim there and I were working on a sort of a claim resolution protocol, ideally sort of application-specific blockchain, but we don't want to sort of reinvent the wheel. And I think we're super aligned to how Regen Network has evolved into I love your statement, Gregory, of the other day, a clearinghouse for eco credits. I just absolutely love that. And so we're really looking to align to what has already been built and hopefully add some value there and be able to launch all of these projects there. I'm super curious, Gregory, on what you started today's conversation with on this sort of interchain nature-based asset or currency, one perhaps driven by memetics. So if there's some time still in this call to explore that a little bit more, I'd love to hear your vision there.
Sure. Yeah. So, well, look, I'm just watching my Twitter feed and seeing, okay, Bank of England and World Economic Forum and all of these big players, pillars of the existing economic apparatus, talking about tokenization of nature and, you know, global carbon currencies. Okay, you know, and this isn't surprising. They've been publishing work on this for a couple of years. I think about 2 years ago, it really started to pick up. Then on the other hand, you have Cello centering its entire go-to-market strategy around refi. That wasn't the beginning of Cello. Cello at the beginning was like mobile first, unbank the banked. That was their meme, and now they're sort of refi. You have groups like Solana and Polygon, and you know, so I'm just sort of painting the picture. There is a broad swath, both in Web3 and in, I guess we could say, not in a pejorative way, but the sort of neoliberal order, the existing financial and monetary institutions. You have all of these people who are really keying in on this process of financialization of nature. Now, okay, there's a huge set of hazards and risks in that process, right? If it is done poorly, we will create, you know, a subprime carbon economy that will collapse. And who is that going to rug? It's going to rug land stewards. Who is that going to rug? It's going to rug nature at the end of the day. So what does it look like to responsibly roll out something that is feeling ever more inevitable? And why is it ever more inevitable? Well, you know, I guess the generous interpretation of this isn't necessarily sort of like the greed memes, but it's more and more people coming to understand that money is a social construct, but the health of nature is not. So if you want money to have a solid foundation, it's going to need to be based in this, you know, really as close to objective reality as humans are ever going to get, which is the health of the biosphere, the health of the bioregions that they live in. Okay, so that's like the broad landscape. Fast forwarding a little bit, you know, how do we accomplish that in a responsible way? How does this happen in a way in which, you know, humanity and I don't know, sort of like the sacredness of life isn't just totally trashed and banalized? That's question number one. Question number two is, what are the institutional and technical tools that we do to make sure that this is sort of responsible and we're not getting these crazy, you know, or too much of this crazy turbulence like, you know, we witness in Web3 with this crazy stuff with Alameda and FTX, the crazy stuff that happened with Terra, et cetera, et cetera. So what I've been, and so disclaimer to Gmo, I am not inspired by Ohm forks. I would just say, I am not at all inspired by Ohm forks. I think that I'm inspired by the lessons learned, right? But I don't think that the approach that was taken there is appropriate for what we're talking about. I think that, and I do think that it is directionally correct, right? And many of us for a long time have been talking about this, like what is a reserve currency? How would we create one that is based on living systems and health? There's you know, taking a couple steps back, there's a bunch of principles that need to be followed there and processes. But the foundation of anything, whether it's happening in a central bank or it's happening in the private banking sector, where the majority of, you know, financial transactions are taking place, or it's taking place in a Web3 place, which is what I've been pitching. There's sort of like a base set of protocols or primitives that are always going to be needed. And those are around robust digital monitoring, reporting, and verification of the underlying assets, sort of this foundational set of ecological contracts, ecological agreements, and ecological units, and the supporting tech and infrastructure to really ensure that whatever data and claims and then subsequent assets are being generated is real. You know, the soil is getting healthier, the biodiversity is resilient or improving, the wildlife corridors exist and are expanding, the water quality is stable or getting better. And that's always the problem that I think problem set that Regen Network has been really inspired to be digging into, in kind of like a, move as fast as you can while still fixing things, instead of move fast and break things sort of a way. And so the concept that I've been socializing with people is, what happens if we try to take some risks and build an inspiring narrative around a Web3 native nature-based currency that every layer one can see itself in and can contribute to? How do, at its peak, Klima was worth $1 billion. What happens if we work together to build a treasury based on, spot commodities and forwards that are the highest quality that we can manage as a grassroots Web3 community? What happens if every layer one buys into that as an interchain reserve currency, and we do it as conservatively as possible, not asking people to YOLO into this and ride a giant speculative bubble, but actually sort of like taking all the learnings we've had with the crazy amount of, we've been fast forwarding through every sort of like financial crisis in the last 300 years, in the last 2 years in Web3. What happens if we take an honest, hard look at that, and then we try to enact as quickly as possible as a community an open source version of what the banks, central banks, and sort of corporate sector are sort of angling towards, and they want to own? What happens if we build an open version of that? I think that it radically increases the likelihood that all of this is going to unfold in a way that preserves beauty and human agency and kind of the sacredness of life. So that's my spiel. Go ahead, Dimo. You've had your hand up for a little bit.
No, I mean, I just want to say how that's such a beautiful vision. I know we're running out of time today. I'm personally interested in unpacking those learning lessons, whether or not those sort of DeFi 2.0 primitives are inspiring, or just their lessons, learning lessons are inspiring. In fact, Sylvie was conceptualized at the peak of that bubble. I do think there's incredible misalignment between, say, like 4 or 5 day lockup periods and the time horizon of nature-based solutions. So that's one, in my eyes, that's the elephant in the room. So sort of very interested in this topic, and at a later stage, at your convenience, I would love to dig into that conversation a little bit further.
Well, we should schedule another Regenerati News Hour to dig deeply into this with a cast of characters and maybe even do some debates. The things that I love about the protocol-owned treasury model is, I think it's directionally correct to have a protocol, community-governed, protocol. And do you mind muting, Dimo? So that's right? That's correct. Is sort of a decentral bank. Hey, we have community governance over a set of algorithms. We have community governance over a set of standards. This is transparent. Who's governing what is clear, and it's all there, and it's audible amongst all the participants and the larger market. I think my critique of sort of the Ohm forks is the choices that they were making. I mean, first off, I think that those communities weren't really all that concerned with community governance, as far as I can tell. And second off, I think the choices that were made regarding sort of like the algorithms or the protocol elements of the reserve currency and how that was governed were not sort of like conservative and pared back to try to maintain the type of stability and sort of the foundational building blocks of reconnecting the human economy with the greater than human world. I think that actually, I think we want to be going towards kind of stability and rootedness instead of turbulence and hypergrowth when it comes to how those elements of the protocol are governed. But that's not a critique necessarily of the smart contract. That's a critique of the the reward return, or the staking periods and all those other things. So maybe there's an awful lot we could pull from that and just have different policies. So I think there's quite a bit of conversation within the Regen Network community about this concept and about taking a crack. Right now, Regen was recently allow listed in the protocol. That means that the Regen Network community could start buying eco credits conceivably and start holding them in a treasury. That means that the Regen Network community could start thinking about community owned liquidity or mechanisms. We could be iterating slowly and conservatively as a community towards some experiments along this line in I think a pretty exciting and responsible way. And I see there's been some posts in the forum about that. I know that the foundation has also been thinking about this. So that's just to say, I think this is a pretty exciting conversation to be digging into. And my approach is let's do it in let's take risks and let's experiment, but let's be really honest and transparent with ourselves about the risks we're choosing to take, and do our best to be creating a large degree of stability, because I think my opinion is that's the right set of conditions. And so we should be sort of more governance forward and science forward, and less hype forward and sort of pumping it forward, if that makes sense, as the things we're prioritizing as a community. Because then, if you think about it, everybody, we're in this condition where everybody across the board, whether it's Web3, Web2, institutional actors, are increasingly excited about this concept of nature-based currencies, financialization of nature. If there is a responsible, open source, community-governed approach to this, we will influence the world in a way that is enormous, right? If people can look at something in which there has been where thoughtful mistakes have been made in public, where there's clear documentation of the processes to make the decisions, the service that provides as a reference design for humanity, I think, is enormous. So that's just, my sets of biases and the approach that I think we should be taking as a community is hey, let's do this. We're doing it for everybody. The reason we're doing it in public and we're doing it open source is because, in a lot of ways, I think the eyes of the world are on Regen Network in a strange way, right? I think we've sort of been ahead of our time for a long time. And, we've never tried to hype it. So we haven't had any crazy pump and dump stuff. There's, and we're slowly iterating towards this sort of concept, but doing it in sort of a spiraling and responsible way, instead of just leaping at the jugular to try to make it happen. So, with that, we just hit 12 o'clock, or at least here, Eastern time, US, which is the end of the Regenerati News Hour time. I want to thank everybody for hopping up. Dimo, thanks for coming up and jamming. I'm super inspired and excited by the progress that you all are making at Sylvie. And Ryan, thanks for sharing a little bit. Ned, thanks for sharing a bit. Thanks for both of your sort of professionalism and competence and openness and just supporting the larger community. Super grateful.
Hey, everybody. I'm not sure if you can hear me. This is Dave, but I can't hear you. But I do have to end the Twitter space. So closing down in 10 seconds.
And thanks, Dave. All right. Bye, everybody. Nice to be with you on this hour, and see you all next week.